Hey, what's up, family? This is Marseille, aka the Property Pastor, here with Kingdom Legacy Builders, where our mission is to help everyday people like you and me to build a lasting legacy for our children and future generations. You know, we're using wealth building principles like real estate investing, and we're here to teach you all about how to find good tenants for your rental properties. If you've got your first property, or if you've dealt with an eviction before, or you're scared to death about how do I find a good tenant who's not going to drive me crazy, who's going to pay their rent on time, who's going to take care of their property, I want you to check out this video because we're going to give you some great tips on the things to look for, right? How to do that upfront legwork so that you don't find yourself in eviction court, so that you don't get yourself in trouble through discrimination, and so that you can build a great relationship so that your rent is paid on time, your property is taken care of properly, and that you're able to sleep at night. So before we get started, I want to ask that you like and subscribe to our channel. Make sure you hit that like button below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every single week, we're dropping new content, great information as your virtual mentor to help you along in your journey. So if this is your first time with Kingdom Legacy Builders, or if you're a part of our Kingdom Legacy family, I want you to drop comments about the things that you're doing in your business, right, to help you to find great tenants. So we're going to talk today, like I mentioned, about how do we do the screening process, and then also what are some ways to advertise for these types of tenants. So first, let's talk about screening. So tenant screening is key, right? Real estate investors, there's a saying amongst real estate investors that you make your money when you buy. In other words, when you buy a deal, right, you make your money up front. Well, it's the same principle applies when it comes to finding good tenants. So in finding a good tenant, you want to do the upfront homework to do your research, to do your background, and understand who it is that you're actually allowing to stay in your property. So I always look at a screening process or an applicant as somebody who's applying for a job, right? And you may ask yourself, why is that, right? If they've got money and they're willing to pay, I want to bring them aboard. But if you were hiring an employee, right, that employee is going to produce something, right? And the tenant, they are producing rent, and they're also taking care of or responsible for your property. So screening is key. So let's talk about some of the things, right? Because we want a tenant who's going to, like I said, pay their money on time, pay their rent on time. They're going to take care of the property, and they're not going to drive you crazy, right? So there's some key principles that are simple that you can apply to your screening process to help you to find a great tenant. So the very first thing you want to do is set clear criteria. Set clear criteria and communicate it on your rental application. So when a tenant comes to look at the property, you want to make sure that they fill out a rental application. You also want to make sure that your criteria is very clear. We put our criteria in all of our advertisements and all of our things that on Facebook, our signs with flyers, right? Everything that we put out for the advertise, it has our criteria. The application has it. Everything is very clear in terms of what the requirements are. Now, a great rule of thumb is that the tenant needs to make 3 times the rent in monthly income. Now that could be from their job, that could be from some sort of disability, it could be from government assistance, wherever it's from. It just needs to be verifiable, and typically up to 3 times the rent. And the reason that you want to do that is because people tend to pay a whole lot of stuff before they pay their rent, but you want to make sure that they have got enough money left, enough money to take care of all of their bills, pay you, and still be able to live, right? Because you don't want to find a tenant who's underqualified. They may come and flash cash really quickly, but if all they can do is, if they make 1 time the rent, there's a very high chance that you're not going to get your money. Additionally, right, you want to make sure that they have no evictions on their background check, right? You want to make sure that in their history they have never been evicted before. So we ask that question on our application, but we also do a background check to verify that information. That's public record. Eviction is public record. So you always want to ask whether or not they have had any evictions on their record. If you don't want your property to have smoke damage, you need to be very clear and say that we don't allow smokers in our properties. Additionally, the same way with pets, right? So, and if you do have pets, right, you want to make very clear there is a pet fee or deposit, a non-refundable deposit, and then a monthly fee for that pet. So you want to have your criteria very clear. So income 3 times the rent, no evictions, right? And if you don't want pets, you got to spell that out. And additionally, if you don't want smokers, you have to spell that out. You just got to realize that all of these things are going to become wear and tear on your property, headaches that you're going to incur later. So criteria is key. And what happens if your criteria is set in your description, some people won't even apply for it. Now, there are still going to be some people who tell lies to you. They're going to write on the application, nope, I've got no evictions. I've got a stellar background. Everything's great. And it's it's wonderful, right? They're going to tell you that because they're banking on you not doing a background check. So that's the next thing. So you set your criteria, but in addition, you need to do a background check. Now, on a background check, you're going to check for evictions. You're going to check for criminal background. You want to know whether or not they're a sex offender. You want to know whether or not they've ever been convicted of felonies, misdemeanors, all of those kind of things. And the thing that's so critical about evictions is that if they've been evicted before, there's a decent chance they may get evicted again. And everybody's got a story. And that's one thing that I've learned in this business is everyone has a story. Now, some of those stories are legitimate, right? But some of them are not. So if a person has an eviction, right, and you decide, okay, I'm going to let them come aboard because they had a divorce or whatever that is, the next thing you want to do is check their references. So on the application, they should put, you always want to ask for references of previous landlords, right? And we typically like to go back one or two landlords, right? Because you may not want to just check the landlord they're renting from now, because that landlord could lie. That landlord could just be wanting so desperately to get rid of the person that they say, you know what, yep, they're a great tenant, and they're just glad to get them off their hands. But you want to go back a few cycles because, two landlords ago, they're going to tell you, and you want to ask that landlord, hey, did they pay their rent on time? How were they in regards to the property? Were they easy to work with, right? You want to make sure you want to check those references. You also want to verify their employment history, right? You want to call up and call that employer, make sure that they are employed there. A lot of folks will ask for proof of employment, like a pay stub, things like that. You want to know how long they've been employed. So if they come and apply to your property and they've only been employed for a month, or you look in their employment history and they have switched, in the last year they've had 3 jobs, that's going to be a problem, right? So you want to do your homework and make sure that you're checking references for employment. You want to make sure that you're checking references for previous landlords, right? All of those things really matter because the person has a history. And you got to recognize that if you go and you apply for credit, they're going to check your credit report. Well, it's the same way with a tenant. If you go apply for a job, they're going to do a background check. So treat that tenant as an employee, and you will find that you find much, much better tenants. If you ever get a tenant that comes, they just flash cash and they say, I'm ready to move in today, you may have a problem, right? That cash will be right in front of you. And it's very tempting because you may have been sitting around like, hey, I really need to fill this unit. But if you fill that unit and then a month later you're in eviction court, eviction is expensive and it takes a lot of time, especially during COVID-19, where many states have input eviction moratoriums. So it takes a very long time. In my state, evictions are painful. In my state, we basically have to we have to apply for aid on behalf of the tenant. We have to enter into an agreement where they can catch up back rent with no late fees. So tenant screening is critical. So in my company, we really focus on screening for a high quality tenant, and we don't compromise. Now, if you're looking, you may be saying, well, how do I run these background checks? Where do I go? Right? If you're using like Zillow has a background check feature. I personally use MrLandlord.com. We'll put that link in the description. MrLandlord.com. They actually will give you your first 2 screenings for free. You won't have to pay anything for them. But typically, we're paying about $20 to $25 to do tenant screenings, and we're getting full background checks. We're getting eviction history. We're getting a criminal background, a whole litany of items for the tenant to understand where they're coming from. But the other thing that I want you to be very careful of in screening tenants is that you have to be careful that you do not discriminate, because if you discriminate, you can get sued, right? You can get into a lot of trouble for discriminating. So you can't discriminate on race, religion, right? Gender, age, handicap status. There are so many different protected classes, so you have to be very careful to not discriminate. So these are some things that have helped me to find great tenants that stay for years, tenants that pay their rent on time, tenants that take care of the property. That's the kind of tenant you want. You don't want a kind of tenant that's going to be a headache, because that's a really easy way to start and quit really fast as a landlord. But in addition, you may be asking, okay, well, how do I find these folks, right? So, looking at how do you screen, but then how do you find them, right? So there's a whole host of ways that you can actually find good tenants, but then you've got to screen those tenants. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the methods. The first method is the newspaper, right? So every local paper has a classified section. They have, print and on web, right? But what I have found is that newspaper advertisements really don't work that well. Typically, they're expensive and they have a short reach. So unfortunately, in this day and age, the newspaper is not really that good anymore. What you'll find, I've used newspaper before years ago. And I was spending hundreds of dollars, sometimes upwards of $100 or $200 a week just to run an ad and getting very low turnaround on those ads. Additionally, though, you can use yard signs, right? So in front of the property, your property manager, landlord, or whatever can put a yard sign that simply says for rent. You can put a flyer for the property, put a contact number in there. I recommend you don't use your personal number, right? You can get a Google Voice number and things like that, right? But you can put a yard sign as well with a contact number and you'll get plenty of calls. On top of that, though, there are services like Craigslist where you can advertise that. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Craigslist advertising because we tend to get all different sorts of types. Some folks are scam artists. Some folks are all over the country. You get all sorts with Craigslist. Then there's Zillow, right? You got Zillow, you got apartments.com. There are a whole host of different web-based advertising mechanisms where you can go and post your rentals. You can post on military sites that go out and actually find, if you live in a military area like I do, right? Military by owner is a great place to go where folks are coming in and out of the area, and that's a really good one. But using some of the web-based services like Zillow, and Zillow's recently started to charge for some of their services, so it's not quite as attractive. It used to be totally free, and we did really well with Zillow, but then they started charging I think it's like $10 or something, which is not crazy, right? So it's really still affordable, way better than the newspaper, but there's still a whole lot of other free services. One of my favorite that we've been using, I use it for lease options, I use it for rentals, all sorts of different things, is Facebook Marketplace. So Facebook Marketplace works great, guys, and there's really a source where you can go and you can link that to your personal page. You can link it to maybe your business page, and in it, folks are just going to message you, right? They're going to say, hey, is this property still available? And then what I do is I'll forward that on to the property manager, or the property manager sets it up themselves, whatever that looks like. If I'm doing something off to my own where my property manager is not involved, I can put a Facebook Marketplace ad in, and then I'm getting tons of leads, right? So in it, like, folks are so active on social media, and if you post in Marketplace, you will get hits, right? You will get opportunities. Now, when it comes down to showing that property, I'm just going to give you a little bit of extra free game. When it comes down to showing property, you're going to run into no-shows. You're going to run into people who say they're going to come and don't come. Now, a quick tip that I'll give you guys, right, is to actually set up open houses versus individual showings. That does several things. Number one, it's an efficient use of your time, right? So instead of you showing up for an appointment at 9 a.m. on Tuesday and another one on Thursday and then on Saturday, and then only 2 people show up, schedule overlapping appointments on one day, right? Or have an open house. So what happens is that you actually build in competition. So depending on your unit, if you got a great unit that a lot of people are calling you on, instead of you setting these individual appointments, set up either an open house or set up appointments that basically overlap one another. Because what that does is it creates competition. And the person who comes in and looks at the property, they know if they want it, they got to go ahead and apply for it, right? We always charge application fees because we just pass that on to run the background check, and it also lets the tenant know that we're serious, right? Lets them know that, hey, if you want this property, you got to be serious about it. You need to go ahead and apply today, right? So we do all of those things because they just help us to screen tenants out, to just weed out, because there's some great tenants, but there's also some really bad ones. And you just got to recognize that if a tenant has been evicted before, if the tenant doesn't make the money, if the tenant, has bad references, chances are they're going to be a bad tenant for you. So do your homework up front, right? Utilize great advertising methods, and you will have no problem keeping your units full. These have worked for me to build my portfolio. We've got 9 properties in our portfolio, just almost 30 doors, and they've worked really well for us over the years. So I hope that this information has helped you out. If you got questions, you got comments, make sure you drop them in the comment section. If we're answering them. We check our page constantly, and we're dropping new content every single week to help you along in your journey. So thank you again, Kingdom Legacy family, for tuning in today. If you're not part of the family, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you're getting keyed into new content every single week. Make sure you share this video with somebody who needs to hear it. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you. I can't wait to see you again soon. Take care, be safe, and God bless.